Hello, everyone. It's so good to be back with a new webinar in our master series. Can't believe it's already 2 weeks since the last one. Today, we are going to talk about building minimum viable products, the MVP version specifically of a typical product. There's a lot of woo woo around MVP, what it means, when to build it, how do you know when you are done, do users get access to this kind of version? We'll try our best today to demystify the thought process for you. Before we start, some house rules. Feel free to post any question you have at any point in time in the chat. We'll try to address them as part of the webinar. If not possible, we'll address them at the end. We'll also have a couple of polls during the webinar. We are basically interested in understanding our audience, your background, your experience so far, and we would appreciate if you participated in them. So, Sinu, why don't we kick off by understanding what an MVP stands for in the first place? There's a bit of confusion about the term itself, and many people use it in different ways. So, what does MVP actually mean?
Thank you, Subhash. Let's jump right into it. So let's talk about what exactly MPV is and why we even discuss this. So in today, as a part of doing this, MVP is, as you know, a lot of things to a lot of people. So what we will focus on is how do we get the most out of doing this MVP? And what's the right approach to MVP? And what are the do's and don'ts of this particular stage of development. We also do not talk about so many definitions. We're not into redefining people or getting into some ideological war about the definition of it. And people have been trying to improvise and change what MVP is with various attempts, such as minimum awesome product, and there are numerous ones. Since MVP has set Silicon Valley on fire a few decades ago, it has been going through its own iterations. We're not going to talk about the other approaches because a lot of things we talk about in this webinar are relevant even if you replace MVP with some other MXP. There's always a first step that is so critical, and why and how we talk about this. And MVP came out of the whole lean startup and lean methodology approach done. We are not going to cover all of its roots and the methodology in its entirety. So our focus is we have to do this MVP stage. We'll see why and why it is important. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about what MVP really is. It's been defined by Eric Rice, who's basically the originator of this definition out of the lean startup. He said this is a version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning with the least effort. So think about it. He did not say this is a product. He did not say this is the right set of features. He did not say these are the killer features. He basically said it's a product that actually gets the most validated learning, that should be relevant learning, with the least amount of effort. That is basically the definition we're going to use, and we will see why. So basically, what exactly is this concept? When we talk about MVP, we talk about a new product coming out with, for the first time, reaching out to the users to validate the concept. So a lot of people who work in a big company would go and say, hey, I'm not building a new product. I am building a replacement. We have had this product for 15, 20 years. Now we need to refreshen it with a brand new user experience or a technology stack, or we need to put it on the cloud with microservices. So why do I still need to do MVP? Absolutely. There is a stage, and that is called, in those scenarios, minimum viable replacement. So the challenge there is you are trying to migrate a whole set of people to the new system. That's a very complicated task in itself. So there are advantages in planning and executing an MVR. So most of the things, if not all of the things we talk about in the webinar, do apply even if you are not innovating or creating a new startup, but absolutely rebuilding a product to upgrade to the new technology. So let's first talk about what not MVP is. It is not the first release of the product. Some people come out and say, hey, we have a 2-year roadmap. We want to build all this. So the first release we give, whatever we release, is MVP. That's not definition. Oh, here's a pilot. It's a pilot launch, and we build some more features on it, and we're going to have a bigger launch. No, it's not a pilot launch. And some people use it as a synonymous, in a synonymous way, MVP, with product market fit. It is not PMF. It is something different we talk about. Some people will say, hey, we need all these 2,000 features. We're going to take these 1,000 features or 500 features. That's MVP. It's not. Some people will say, if we do this, whatever set of features, this 20 or 80 features, that's MVP. It's not that either. So what is it? Basically, MVP is, we talked in the previous webinar about the full product lifecycle. In that, the very first stage is the proof of concept. Once you have done proof of concept, you really move into what a real product is. So MVP is actually a real product that touches the user for the first time. A lot of people call MVP like a handshake with the user community. However, it has a purpose. And the purpose is you're using it to validate your most fundamental hypothesis. Why are you even building this product? So what are your assumptions or thesis on why this product is needed, or you are going to get your return on investment? We need to validate them at this stage. Why do we want to validate them? The reason we want to validate them is this is the first time you're reaching out to users. All the future investment you put into the product, your time, money, your heart, the whole thing, you want to make sure it is going in the right direction. It is substantiated. It is set on a solid foundation. So you want to validate the core tenets of your business plan, whole hypothesis at this stage. To achieve that, we need a vehicle. That is MVP. So we build something, give it to the users, and you are validating something. So just building the product is not MVP. Just releasing that to the users is not MVP. It is actually building that vehicle and completing the process of validating hypothesis to enable the validation hypothesis. That is MVP. Let's take an example only one example between what an MVP is and what is not. Let's say your product is, I want to build a highly energy efficient house. So it may require some cost-effective flooring and greatly some type of new insulated walls and some kind of a solar roof. Let's make this up. So if you say, oh, I'm going to build this new floor type that's either less expensive or energy efficient, that is my MVP. If it really works, then I'm going to build the walls in the next release and then the roof in the third release. That is not an MVP. What would be an MVP is, I'm going to build maybe a very small one, maybe a dog house, maybe a 10 by 10 one room, but that has the floor, that has this new insulation in the walls, that has this solar roof. That is my MVP to see if it actually provides the energy efficiency within the other parameters that are part of my core tenet, such as maybe cost or speed, whatever. And as the subsequent releases, if that hypothesis is validated, you can say, hey, the next version, we actually can put in bathrooms and kitchen with and extending the house. Hey, we can actually build a 5-bedroom house, whatever you want to do. That is an MVP because you're functionally delivering something that is complete and necessary to validate your core hypothesis. So that hopefully that made it clear. We can take so many other examples. Another popular one on the internet people talk about is you want to transport people from point A to point B. So you want to build, let's say, a new kind of car. That's your end goal. So you don't build some engine and transmission as MVP and then say later on, oh, I'm going to build the doors and the wipers and air conditioning. In the final release, I'm going to have automatic car locks and window rollers, etc. The way to do it is, this is a popular example people talk about. I want to transport people from point A to point B. So maybe I'll build a skateboard is my MVP, or a motorcycle. Then I go build a three-wheeler or a basic car that does not have air conditioning and wipers and all the rest of it. And then I will build a full-fledged car that can compete with anybody. So the MVP would still transport people from point A to point B. It's not a component of something that transports people. That's the difference between an MVP and non-MVP. So now, why do we talk about this? Let's talk about this. So a lot of people say, oh, MVP, we need product market fit. So if you are doing a startup, you go for funding. So first question. In the early on days, people used to say, have you done MVP? Especially if it is innovating a technology or brand new, something you're inventing. But for a lot of products, it's product market fit. So I say, have you done PMF? Even in a bigger company, they would ask the same question in a different way. So MVP is not PMF. What's the difference? MVP is the product we build to achieve PMF. So PMF is something that the users or market tell us after we give them an MVP if we have achieved PMF. So a good analogy would be, you take an exam. Maybe it's a certification exam. Taking the exam is equivalent to delivering MVP. Whether you graduated, whether you passed the exam or not, what grade you got is the PMF part. If, let's say, you get at least 80% of the score or points, you pass. So PMF would be achieving that 80%. If you did not, you have to go test the exam again. That is the concept of MVP. If you don't hit PMF, keep iterating. So MVP is not this fixed set of, I'm doing it, or it's going to come out at the end of November, my MVP. So I'm going to start on my revenue product, which is my next stage. I'm going to deliver by June. You cannot plan, because MVP is like taking an exam. So you are really trying to achieve PMF by delivering an MVP, but PMF is not something you do. That's what the market is. We all know people like to find luck with their product or startup or their effort. Luck is basically matching the opportunity with preparation. So MVP and doing it the right way is the preparation. The market and the users provide the opportunity. Our job is to meet that opportunity with all the preparation we can do. So doing that preparation is doing MVP right. So in the rest of the webinar, I think we just focus on the practical, simple ways of doing it. So you know our philosophy. We think everybody and anybody should be building absolutely mind-blowing products without having to get a PhD in product management or some kind of a computer science degree. It is our capability to go achieve this. So we're going to peel the layers and simplify to the extent, hey, we can follow this and get it done. That's our goal. So here's a funny thing. People will get by and say, hey, I did an MVP and we got PMF done. We got product market fit. People want this product. And so what's the measure? Nobody answers. It has been one of the vaguest things, even for most experienced people, what a product market fit means. So nobody really quantified it. There's one person who actually took a shot at it. His name is Sean Ellis, and we can talk about his background and how at a different time. Basically, what he has done was, if you give the MVP to a bunch of users, after they use it for whatever amount of time, you take the product away or make it not available, at least 40% of the people, they say, I'm very disappointed. I really wanted this. So for those of you who are familiar with the marketing lingo, we have been using NPS, which is a different metric with more kind of rigid definition. This is also kind of an NPS. What you want to see is you have delivered a minimum viable product to a bunch of users. You want them to respond by saying, this is, well, it's kind of nice. That's not what you want. I want it. And if I don't have it, I'm going to be disappointed with a certain amount of certainty. That is absolutely, that is basically the product market fit. So we need, if you do this, the chances of your product and the company becoming successful is really increases a lot. Nobody guarantees anything, but it really increases. Why do we want to discuss this MVP? It should be clear by now, right? Because this sets the stage to achieve higher level success. But let's really look at it in a different way. Rather summarize different reasons. This is the opportunity to learn about the user's usage and the market. You always, the first time you take any product to the users, you learn a lot. Even if you don't want, you end up learning, right? So by doing it the right way, by preparing to get that and preparing to seek that input in a certain way, you maximize your success. So it's really, really important point. And this is the vehicle, this is the means to achieve product market fit if you do it in a certain way. And a lot of times, right, with this product market fit, there's another thing that happens. This happens again, the people who have been doing products for 2-3 decades, right? By the way, it happened to me in the past, it happened to Subhash, it happened to everyone. That is, PMF is not a lot of times, unless you're careful, it's not a black or white thing. Hey, I aced this exam, I passed or I failed. What happens is, it leaves something for interpretation. I'll give you an example. Let's say you reached out to 10 users with your MVP product. You say, hey, if 4 of them say I'm disappointed, then I achieved PMF. Or you define it a different way. At least 8 out of 10 say, I love it. When is it available? And I'm going to recommend to my colleague or my friend, etc. That's my success, whatever some acceptable definition we have. And you also define your failure and say, I give it to 10 people to use. And if not even 5 people say, I want it, I got to rethink about this product. Okay. So you achieve a success that is just at the threshold of rejecting it, but it hasn't reached the high mark. What are you going to do? You're going to stop, walk away from the product. You're going to revisit. A lot of times there's pressure on product managers from stakeholders. Have you done it with MVP yet? When are we going to launch this? When are we going to see the revenues? So they interpret, not see the PMF. They interpret and say, oh yeah, hey, you know what? I got about 5 to 6 people, they said they love the product. But the others, I interpret that they said, if I have the SharePoint integration, they would have loved it. Or if I had the mobile implementation first, they would have loved it. So I take it as a yes, I'm going to go build my next stage, which is minimal revenue product. Guess what happens? You go finish the product, you put in a lot of effort, you go to the market, and the initial 5 people who said they will use it, either they are your friends or they love your marketing or they really like what you have done, they use it. And then your growth kind of stalls. You keep putting in a lot of effort, you try to do this integration of SharePoint, that integrates a mobile version, keep piling on features, put your developers under pressure, run yourself into the ground. More users are not coming, slow to come. And the stickiness of usage is not there either. That is kind of called the valley of death. Basically, you go there, keep investing a lot more. Basically, your best strategy is, pray and hope. So that we need to avoid. And doing MVP right actually helps to avoid. And finally, any subsequent development, all of it, you want it to basically stand on firm foundation. Do MVP right. What does it mean? It's not just a fail or pass. It's not just an exam. You actually know more. If you are you're doing it the right way, if you have the instinct, or if you have the interest, if you have the energy to do it, you actually learn so much from the users on not only what they value, how much they value, the insights into their reaction to the product, which we're talking about institutionalizing and formalizing as a part of MVP, so that we can help you increase your chances of doing an MVP. So that's our reasons. So let's put this in perspective to answer what Subhash has been asking about. What is MVP and why are we talking about it? So we talked about the product life cycle in the previous webinar. We have completed proof of concept. That means we have de-risked either the core algorithm or technology, and we have de-risked the core business concept, right? And then MVP is not a pilot. It is not a video clip. It's not some wireframe. It is not some hand-waving tap dance. It's actually a product. You see, MVP has 3 letters. You got the last one, product. It's actually a real product. And the other one, it's a viable product. What does it mean? When we go to the future stages, such as the minimum revenue product or minimum scalable product, we are going to build on top of what we gave in MVP. We're not going to throw this away and build something new for a real revenue product. We have to treat MVP as a real product for the input, for the feedback to be real, and to really test it in the real world. So it is a viable, just literal meaning, it's a working, capable product that we're going. That's the viability. And the minimum aspect, this is the one that is really almost the operating word for MVP. So the minimum comes from, why is it so important? People say, why MVP? Hey, we have the money. We don't care about another investing. I'm a big corporation, another $1 million. We have all the engineers. I have 200 engineers. Why not do more? It's not just the ability to write your more features. The minimum comes from 2 reasons. For yourself and for your entire team, the focus on what is the key concept, key hypothesis, key value proposition, key benefit of the product. How do you actually figure out what it is, and how do you put more focus on it? It's almost making a racehorse go by faster by putting blinds. You do not want to be lost. You do not want discussions on other things. You want to test what the users say about your product. Just give them what you want their feedback on, not all the other things. Don't try to blow them off by saying, hey, you know what? I need not MVP, but MCP. I need a minimum competitive product. I need to be better than in the ERP situation, let's say, better than some Oracle or some other system. No, that's you're testing something else. You really want key hypothesis, and everything should be nailed to that one, and the valuable insights that are relevant for your business plan. How do you do this? Is this some black magic? No, we're going to actually peel this and make it so simple to follow. Hopefully, that will be clear in the next 20 minutes or so.
A lot of people who are listening to this webinar will be now thinking, oh, right? Even we have made that mistake of misunderstanding what an MVP is and going in the wrong direction in the past. But it seems critical to identify what does not constitute an MVP, more important than understanding what an MVP actually is. Thank you, Sina, for that. So it's almost like MVP should be considered like a large experiment on the way to product market fit or product success in general. There is a question, can you skip an MVP? If you can, should you skip an MVP?
Yeah. So absolutely, Subhash. And there's a question as well that I see that is MVP part of product market fit? Do we need to do it? Can we escape it? Let me combine them and answer the following way. So MVP is basically 3 letters. Okay, you call it XYZ, ABC, PQR, whatever. It doesn't really matter. There's always a first step when your product touches the user, right? That's given. So you have to do that. Let's just call that MVP for argument's sake. So you are never really escaping a stage where you are meeting your user for the first time. Now think about it. What do you want that first stage to be? What do you want? You know everything so much because you have done these surveys and market research and did some other things and did some experiments in the lab. So you're so sure you're going to give it in the real world and it works. Is that your thesis? Even if you have done it, do you know the marketing and business success will be there? Do we know it? So if you are with the rest of the universe in thinking, you may not. There is element of doubt, or you have these possibilities. You have at least filtered and minimized these possibilities. You want to actually eliminate some of them and really firm up how you want to build the rest of the product. Let's call that stage MVP. If you accept the definition, yeah, no, you're not really skipping MVP, no matter how you do it. That experimentation nature is so necessary. Whatever chances you want to take with your product, take them now. Don't take them after you invest a lot more time and energy and money. To answer one of the questions, like, is it a part of product market fit? So let's revisit what this means. Product market fit, one of the, again, overused definitions and understandings is it's a state to reach. So it is something that happens. Like, okay, I go to the gym every day for 6 months and my body fat drops to, I don't know the real numbers, by the way, so I'm making this up. So forgive me. Let's say it drops to 5%, right? So doing this exercise, is it a part of that? Absolutely. You want to achieve it some other way? Fine, that's fine. But the goal is still that. A product market fit is basically taking that product and the market, make them aligned. To do that, we really cannot change the market, right? We can change the product more easily, unless you think we can change the market. We change the product and we take approaches in putting a product in the user's hands and measuring what it is and adjusting, iterating until we achieve that product market fit. So if we go with the definition of that is product market fit, this MVP, yes, MVP is the vehicle we use to reach product market fit. That's correct.
Thanks for that, Sino. By the way, if you're at 5% fat, you will be ripped. So, can you please walk us through the process of building an MVP? We have talked about what an MVP is so far, but if, for example, I wanted to go about using this concept to build a product and I'm at the MVP stage, what are the things that I should think about?
Okay. So let's take an approach. I'm going to cover very in a rudimentary way what the background is, why we do certain things, but stick to practical approach, steps we can take. Okay? So the first thing I want to do, right? If you are taking only 2 or 3 points away from this webinar, please take this to be one. MVP is not just about a product. When you think about MVP, I want you to think about what, which is the product, why, which is the strategy, who, that is the people, how, that is the execution. So this is a stage out of the 4 stages of product life cycle where you really think comprehensively about these 4. By the way, every stage you think about this, but in certain stages, some things are more important than the other. In this stage, I would definitely think about what is an MVP, why am I doing this MVP, are the key, what are the strategic elements of my MVP, who, what is their approach and attitude, how should I set up my team, what is my product team at this stage, is people, business, and what are the things I need to focus on to do, how part of doing it is MVP to make it successful is execution. So let's go into that. So one of the questions is, how do you know you have failed product market fit? We'll come to that. That's a good question. I'll give you an answer. I don't mean to tease you. You actually don't know until you have done MVP and users start using it. That's the simple answer. But an MVP can go on for 3 to 6 months. Do you really take a chance of failing with 6 months of effort? We don't want to do that. There's a way to minimize that. So we will talk about that. Please hang in there for 1 more second. So let's just talk about the what part. What's in the MVP? We already talked about the concept of what MVP is, right? It's the first exposure to the user. And it's not really a deterministic stage that says, if I do these 20 features, boom, I have MVP, right? You know, you may need to iterate until you reach MVP. And one more thing, MVP is not a mad scientist thing from the lab that you're going to throw away and build a real product based on what users say. That could be pilot or proof of concept. An MVP is a real product, a product that a user actually uses in a real situation to achieve real functionality. And the future products are built on top of it. That's the concept of what. Now, let's talk about what do you do when you are doing the MVP. Number 1, as a product manager, please remember this. This is, I think, has become, for me personally, a very, very core principle. That is, if you are defining, if you are doing the requirements, don't just write, here is my requirement, I want this feature. Focus on defining, when you're defining MVP, the measurement that you are going to take from the users and market after you give them MVP. Define the learning you want from doing MVP. So the whole process, the lean methodology is build, measure, learn, BML. Given the contemporary news, I can juxtapose the BLM or something else, but I stay with the products, not politics. So it's BML, build, measure, learn. So MVP, define them as when you are doing this product. So important. Define the criteria, success criteria for MVP. So I see one of the questions, right? Basically, how do you know whether you have passed or failed? You have to define. You have to define the success criteria for MVP. And we will talk about that. We gave an example before of the NPS, or how many users will be disappointed if you don't have this product after using it. But they all come from not you building a product and putting in the hands of the users. You don't declare whether MVP is a success or failure. You declare the success or failure of the MVP based on what the users say. That's really, really critical to note this. And then you actually design the features, right? But the features, this is the what part. You design the features after doing the hypothesis and the value proposition. So the features you design map to the hypothesis you chose to test. And then you actually have to apply a test. It's so critical. I'm sorry, this is such an important topic. We are going through very fast to meet in half hour, but we can go into that much more detail if you're interested at any given point. So you have to apply some filters and processing and say, do I really have the minimal set to test my core propositions? If you do that, you're really building MVP. Now let's focus on why. Why are we doing this? MVP is more about purpose than what. So you really need to know for MVP, why, what are the key decisions you're trying to make? And for each, what's an example of a decision? Let's say you have 2 or 3 hypotheses on what makes the product very, very required or successful. Let's say you're building Tesla. So let's say you have 2 key components, 2 hypotheses, 2 value propositions. One is, hey, it's an electric car. One is it's autopilot, or it's a computer on wheels, whatever it is. So you both are very important to success. But your identity, the decision, what you are building this company on, you want to make some decisions. Which one first? How do I balance them? How do I place a value on them? This is the strategic part of what goes into defining the MVP. So maybe you do both in MVP, but you also want to know, what do users value more? Do they value this, very appealing computer on the wheels more, or they really value that is really running on batteries, not gasoline? What are they really paying money for? By the way, you may be surprised by the answers if you want to dig into that and read about this on the internet. It may be different from what you guess. So anyway, and then you also need to know, if I do this MVP, what's my desired outcome? Okay, I go through this MVP, I build it, and I go declare to my managers and the CEO, and we're done with MVP. What's the desired outcome? What do you want? And you really need to know if there are multiple domains, like the Tesla example that we came up with. In the Tesla example, there could be 4 different domains, by the way. What's your core domain? So you really have to stay true to that at MVP level. You can't do it all. So what is the practical steps that you can take in this? Basically, minimize the number of key decisions. After you have written, here are my decisions I need to take, minimize them. You can also stagger them, but minimize them and find the right way how you actually can figure out what those decisions are. By the way, you don't need a multi-billion dollar project like a Tesla. Let's say you have an e-commerce site you're building. So let's say you are doing some women's fashions. You may have a question for your MVP first version. Should I put clothes or accessories on the landing page, or both? So you have a question to make. That's a strategic decision. It's a feature thing, right? It's a strategic decision. How would you go do about it? But that's the decision you need to make before you launch the bigger launch with a lot of marketing dollars and effort, etc. So you need a way to figure out this one. maybe have another question. Do I need mobile version or the computer version first? So that's the key decision. So you have key decisions and you minimize them and you map to the other things we talked about. Maybe you have a competitive position you need to accomplish, especially when we talked about a replacement strategy, not a new product. In that case, you need to identify your differentiators, your key differentiators you want to do. So that is the why part. Now let's talk about who. So as the product goes from proof of concept to the MVP stage, this is a fundamental transformation. So let's talk about if it is a large corporation. When you start at the proof of concept, when you start to begin the product, you basically pull in whoever is available or maybe already in your department, in your group, you have a bunch of engineers that are available at the time, or you just pull together some team. So it's kind of random set of people with some capability to do that. And then you go to MVP. Let's say it's a startup and you have almost no money, or you're pulling together your couple of friends and capable people, founders, and say, let's build a POC. You're doing that. But when you go to MVP, at this stage, it is a serious business. Why is it a serious business? You're putting something in the hands of your users. So a few things need to happen. Let's talk about this. If you are a product manager, you might be the most brilliant product manager at the conceptual stage of the proof of concept, coming up with a new idea. You may not have completely been ready to do MVP. MVP requires that you actually step back. You are doing things in the POC stage. You are writing every requirement. You're doing every wireframe. You are thinking about every little thing. Here, you have to step back and take more of a leadership position for the entire product, not just not for people. We're not talking about leadership from a manager point of view. You are actually imagining the situation of, from the requirements, how does this translate into development, to testing, to actually delivering to the users, and how do I take their feedback, how do I measure their reaction, and what actions do I want to take based on what I see. That is a whole food chain of activities. The product manager becomes responsible for architecting that. The product manager becomes responsible for putting in that process of doing that. And the rest of the product team itself, for each function, you want a validated, a qualified person to do it. I kind of know testing is not good enough if you're giving something to the user. I kind of know development is not good enough. Oh, I know how to write code, so I will do product management in the daytime and development at nighttime. Unless you are a full-fledged engineer, may not be the right thing to do. And the other thing you need to do as a team is, because this is the stage of learning, you really want to manage a single team, a single sprint team, single product team. You're not dividing them and setting them up for parallelism and scaling the development speed, etc. You really want a single team. So let's talk about the specific actions you want to do. Manage a single sprint team and have clear roles for all the functions we talked about in the full food chain. By the way, it may be the same person. The same product manager may do the requirements, may actually be responsible for collecting feedback from the users, for analyzing and doing the business analyst function, does not matter. But you still have identified the role, and there's a person associated for each of them. And you want actually functional specialists, and you actually want an architecture, because it is the method to the madness. Because MVP is the product that will grow up, but will become the revenue product later. So you need a place for the architecture here as well. And you need to add the functions that did not exist in POC of the business analyst type functions, whoever does it. And you also want to make sure the entire team is involved in watching this full food chain of activities and getting the feedback. How do you do it? The entire team actually does the support. So this is the important characteristics of MVP. So let's discuss the how part. So you have all these. You discuss what and why and who. So how exactly do you do it? We talked about this in the previous webinar. Every stage, don't attempt 3 to 6 months of development without having a checkpoint. There was a question earlier. So you won't know until when do you know you failed in MVP? You want to break the MVP into meaningful phases. Let's say you have 2 or 3 key hypotheses to test. Your MVP is only complete after you successfully test. It's okay to break them into phases and say, I first test this hypothesis, then this. Some people call it MVP1, MVP2, etc. It's all good. So break them into phases. And I'm going to skip the left side portion of it a little bit and focus on the practical things. This is what we recommend you do. You prioritize the core hypothesis and the validations you want to get when you write features or the requirements, not focus on the complete, thorough, like bulletproof quality and reliability and scalability aspects at this stage. What else do you do? Identify what your trade-offs are in the architecture and technology. You really have to identify, you have to know what they are and make a choice. Because once you identify, even if you make a wrong choice, you can go and fix it later. If you never identify those trade-offs, then it's a different problem. And the key aspect, the number one thing I would say at this stage, as you break them into 2 or 3 smaller phases, have a design review after each phase. How do you do it? Invite the stakeholders. The number one responsibility for the product manager at this stage is be that bridge between the stakeholders and the product team. Invite them. Make them be, expose them to what your trade-offs are, how you are doing, how you are planning to achieve that product market fit. You will be surprised how many doubts go away, how much confusion gets eliminated, how you actually start that process of learning and tweaking and finding that pivot and repivoting, whatever those discussions are at each stage. So when you go to phase 2, phase 1 is on a much more solid ground. So you are linearly progressing towards the end of MVP as opposed to invest heavily 3 or 6 or 9 months or 1 year into it and then finding out maybe I made a couple of small wrong steps early in the process. And make sure as you deliver, even if you deliver in pieces before you reach the end of MVP users, set up those usage and user metrics, start monitoring them, and start monitoring the mapping between the benefits users derive and the features you are developing. And as you learn from the users, make sure you set in the process in the stage, the entire team is publishing, learning those learnings so that from phase to phase, so that by the time you reach MVP, you already have a little bit of an oiled engine. So MVP becomes more successful. So these 4 stages of what, why, who, and how will help you do MVP right. Why is this? We talk about this like this because you really have to remember that MVP is an iterative process. Your goal is not delivering a chunk of code called MVP. Your goal is to achieve the goal that code should have achieved the business-wise. That is the product market fit or some level of success in the market. That is really the goal.
Thanks, Hinu. It's almost like these 4 aspects are acting like pillars of the whole MVP process. Especially when you consider that you are actually learning on the fly. It's almost like you are jumping off a cliff and then you have to perfect your landing. And you have to figure out how to do it when you are falling down along the way. It's also very important to note that there should be a series of checkpoints that we evaluate when we are delivering against the MVP. Can you walk us through a real development example, just so that people can actually correlate with a real MVP build process?
Absolutely, my pleasure. So given taking more time than usual, I will go a little bit crisply, but cover the key steps. Please feel free to ask me questions. You can always follow up later on with email or even a phone call as well. So let's go to this. So we talked about an example before where a company that has to develop a lot of proposals for their customers. So customers ask for a proposal on a new project. These people work on a new proposal, and the process involves putting together different parts of it, technical part, financial part, and all the rest of it, put a proposal together, sending it to the customer. The general manager of the unit realized, hey, every time the proposal comes, we are reinventing the wheel, and people are doing repetitive tasks, I want to automate, this efficiency is not good enough, and people are frustrated. So that is the situation. So he kind of wants to explore a software product that automates, increases efficiency. So that's the example we discussed. So following the principles we discussed, I would not just come up with and say, here is my list of 43 features or a bunch of use cases to go do this. The way I would approach is, what's the value proposition? The value proposition is, I want to do new proposals in half the time. Okay, how would you do it? Here is my hypothesis. My first hypothesis is, if I eliminate the repetitive, mechanical grudge work people do on a day in and day out basis without even thinking, same things, and automate them, which is easy enough to do, I would assume, then it saves at least 25% of the time. That's my analysis by talking with a few people, preliminary market research. My second hypothesis is that, hey, there's a lot of similarities between the new requests from customers and the proposals we have done in the past. Why can't they reuse the material we have developed in the past in some fashion? So the hypothesis here is, if we reuse the material already available, it at least saves 25% of the time. Great, two hypotheses. Now I want to go make sure in my MVP, I am doing these two and making sure I'm achieving the benefit without which the whole exercise is useless. I'm achieving the value proposition I'm trying to achieve to succeed with this whole project. If my goal is just deliver those 43 use cases, that's different. That's not MVP. MVP means I need to succeed achieving the value proposition. So how do you do it? That means when I define the hypothesis, as I define the features or the capabilities I want to build, I also define measurements. This is the rules we define. Please be specific about your measurements and learnings you want from the product. So here, these are my examples. You can, if we really do a market research and if we have a set of users, if we are responsible for this division, we'll have people to talk and gather more. My measurements are, hey, I'm going to give it to 6 users. Either it's 6 departments or 6 customers or 6 groups or 6 proposal managers. I want at least 4 of them to say, this helped me. And if I don't have this, I'm going to be sad. I want it. It really is helping me. What else do I want? I also want to measure the actual time saved by eliminating the repetitive work. I also want to measure how much material is available or reused in the newer proposals. So I'm looking for insights from the capabilities I delivered. Why do I want these measurements? And by the way, to really do these measurements, we may need some features in the development to achieve those measurements. They can also, several methods to do it. Some are survey-based, some are built-in features in the product, some are after-fact you do it. There are many, mechanically measured, etc. What I want to learn are, I not only want to learn if I am achieving the value proposition with what I'm doing, I also want to understand certain threshold values. That is, hey, if I really save, let's say not 25%, I save 19% time for a proposal manager for a new proposal. Will they still say I'm disappointed if I don't have the product? Or is it 17%? Or is it 55%? That is a useful insight, because it's an assumption that 25% achieved the hypothesis will actually support the value proposition. But I really want to learn. What else do I want to learn? I also want to know if I deliver both benefits, eliminating mechanical work and reusing the material, which one is more value and by how much more value? That is, if I really gave them $100 and say, you can spend the $100 in any which way, $100 all on one feature, one of the two, or 50-50, 75-20, you do, but spend it on these 2 features. How will they do it? Because it gives me a lot of learning as I build the feature of this product, where I should emphasize. I want to know so much about user and usage. So when I'm writing the features, I'm not just consumed completely by, oh, I need to eliminate these mechanical steps. I'm a genius, so I know what users want. Or, oh, this is how to reuse. I know some AI, I know some content management system, I know some syntax extract or whatever. No, wait a second. I am really focused on, I want to learn all that intelligence, understand the user and their usage, not as much about it. So that is the discipline we think is so useful for product managers and product teams to become very, very successful. If you follow this approach, the chances really increase. Okay, you have done this. Then what? So this is an interesting thing, right? People ask, hey, how do I know I have the minimal set? People will come up with and say, hey, this is the minimal. I must absolutely have it. I want this green button, that red button. If it's not round, but it's square, it's not doing my work, etc. This is what we say. We kind of take the approach of, zero-based budget, meaning all the features you have, throw them out of the room. You only bring each feature at the door and ask, is this feature contributing to my core value prop and a core hypothesis? Then come in. And the next feature, are you contributing directly to it? Come in. This one is not contributing, throw it out. So you have a budget of zero-based, and then you are letting them only that meet your criteria. So how would you practically do it? Because we said at the beginning, we want to emphasize simplifying everything. I would do a simple table. Here's the format, you can do your own. So my value prop is, I want to do new proposals in half the time. Right. And I have two hypotheses, by the way. We can do 4 or 5 in this, but we're trying to simplify it to make the point. One is eliminate repetitive work. And the second one is eliminate reinventing the wheel for the content, same content to work multiple times. To achieve the first one, I need one capability in the product. I want to manage my content contributors, how to find them, how to assign the task, and how do I get the content from them to assemble all that. It's repetitive work. Every day I look at the calendars and send emails that work. The second one is I want capability in the product to identify which of the past material matches my new proposal. And the other capability is, can I actually fetch files, whether automatically or mechanically, whatever, to assemble for the new proposal. Then I go into and say, how directly, how relevantly this capability matches to the hypothesis and the value proposition. So here, we assign some score, 10 on a 1 to 10 scale. Whatever, your judgment here at this point, because you're going to validate everything with the help of the users. So you have a judgment at this point. That's all you have. That's why MVP is an iterative process, right? So you say, hey, it's really important. It's 10 out of 10 for the first one. For the second one, absolutely. I need to find the matching content. That's 10 out of 10. Bringing already the earlier proposals, etc. automatically, it's maybe 8 out of 10. It's my assumption. Fine. Now let us break this down into whatever you want. Feature, you call them features, you call them epic stories, use cases, have fun. Depending on the tool and the system and your approach, they're all of them or any of them. So then you say, for the first one, contributors, let's break it up. Identify and assign contributors, and then check if they are available, if their calendars are available. Then keep sending reminders. I need this by this Friday. I need this by Tuesday, whatever. And then share the content that needs to be shared across with some way. Instead of doing all this through email, calendars, etc., and building these use cases, the system can do it. Then I go to correlation factor and say, this is so important. Sharing common content between contributors, that's not so important for my core tenant. I'm not talking about the product. For my hypothesis to test, I am testing the hypothesis, right? Now, let me take one easy example and we'll go from here. The last one, fetch files from the older files, proposals into the system. Let's say it's very important, 8 out of 10. Because if you don't bring them in, how am I going to assemble? I have to copy and paste manually. So it's very important. However, my files are in different repositories. It may be in Dropbox, Google Drive, some SharePoint version of OneDrive, local PC, Box, whatever they are. Each one of them, I don't want to go to my development team and say, I need integration into Dropbox. It's my MVP feature. I want Google Drive. It's so important. Because it's not to test the core tenant. My core tenant I want to test is, can I bring old proposals? That's really high, 8 on 10. But Google Drive itself is maybe 5 on 10, 4 on 10. Maybe it's not even relevant, 1 on 10. But at least doing one of them, so I can bring my older files into the system, is of high importance. So I would do this. A table like this, you can adopt this, you can do in your own version. What you are doing is making sure the column that says features, each one is tested against the capability, hypothesis, and value proposition. As long as you're doing that, it helps you to identify the minimum features. Anything that looks border and suspicious, the default mode is keep it out. So that's what you do. And hopefully that helps in doing this example. And I'm going to quickly do.
Yeah.
Subhash, I'm going to wrap up in 2 minutes. So
Sure.
we talked about the what, why, who, and how. Here is a checklist, summary of all of them. We don't need to go through all of them because you have gathered by now. Don't just write features. Identify the hypothesis. How do you measure? How do you learn? Identify what a success means. Identify how exactly you measure the feedback from the users, because that's a core tenet. It's as important as any feature you're going to come up with. And basically identify what you want to learn from it, and identify what an exit criteria from this stage before you go to the next stage is. That is really the checklist. This material is available on the website. Please, you can get it, or we can send you if you like. Just putting it all together, wrapping this up. The MVP, let's remember the goals. Why is so important. It's not just the features. You need to have goals. And the goal is the first user contact, and we want to make sure we're maximizing what we are learning. That means you have to identify the measurements and learning, not just the features. Take this point alone. I feel, Subhash, I assume same, I speak for him. We feel so grateful if that's all it came out of it. And understand the transition. You're moving from proof of concept to this stage. That means the nature of development includes the full food chain of activities, the delivering and supporting the user and understanding that. And the product management moves from just doing to leading the whole product management. And the completion stage, exit stage from MVP includes iterating until you're happy enough with PMF, you're successful, and your stakeholders happy with that. And you actually have set in processes and systems to really grow up and build a revenue product. Thank you.
Thank you, Sino. I want to echo the sentiments and repeat what you said about development being a very attractive thing to do. Once you get into it, you get sucked into the whole process, chasing after the wrong customers or even doing the wrong value props, right? So having a process like this at least helps you take some amount of time as a reflection point in certain periods to see if you're going in the wrong direction or if you're heading in the right direction. Thank you so much for the discussion. If you have any final points on what people should carry home and think about for themselves, that's something that would probably help the listeners.
Yeah. So I'm sure most of you attend a lot of webinars and do a lot of other learning exercises, but nothing sticks until we use it. So all we ask is that a minute of reflection. You might be building a product. You might be at this stage of MVP. Maybe you haven't gotten there, or you already passed MVP. You are doing other things. Rather, you have been told you already passed MVP and you are in the later stages. So if you reflect on the current product, have a couple of questions to reflect on. You can share the answer with us. We don't need any other details to know that are privy. So we just want to a little bit of reflection. That is, only when we exercise our mind on this, then something sticks. So the question: has your product successfully completed MVP? Have you moved off MVP already? Yeah. So you can share with us, or you can think for yourself and write about it. The second question: have you achieved PMF? If any stakeholder asked within your company or even from outside, hey, have you achieved that elusive PMF? What is your own impression? What have people told you about? If you say the answer is yes, what's the indicator they told you? Or you told yourself? What has been your PMF? If I am doing, by the way, new product, I would actually start here. What is it I want to be and work backwards? It's my new status. A lot of times I like to joke that I wear clothes so that I don't show my all the bruises I got doing products. So it's not like I have done everything right. More wrong things than right things to learn these things. So I would start here. I would err on the wrong side of asking more questions and less questions at this stage. And finally, last one. If you really have to follow this exercise or do it this way, what is your biggest difficulty? Is it people? Stakeholders say, hey, you are being too, I don't know, some part of your body, you are being too strict. Just do it. We know. It's just replacement product. We know what MVP should be. Or is it technical engineers will say, I don't really know what you're talking about? Or is it really, well, I don't know my users yet. I'm doing an MVP, but I really don't know what my users. What is the difficulty? Because if you identify what the difficulty is, and we'll be happy to suggest a solution or help you out, or I'm sure as soon as you identify a question, you actually would come up with a solution yourself. Please take a minute, whether you do it now or later, please take a minute. That's all we ask. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sino. And reach out to us at any point in time to understand more, clarify points that we have discussed in this webinar, or even to ask questions that about things that we have not covered here. We'll be very happy to help you with any kind of thought process that you're having. Thank you, Sino. Thank you, everybody, for attending the webinar. It was great to be here, and look forward to seeing everybody again in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much.
Bye.